Japan is legally prohibited from forming an army, but it has an army called the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. Let us tell you the story first. Let us go back a little to the beginnings of the 20th century. The Japanese army at that time began expanding in Asia, occupying areas of the Soviet Union and invading the Korean Peninsula, and then entered in the first two world wars in 1914. The Japanese army emerged victorious, and the strongest army in East Asia until its influence reached Mongolia, where it occupied these areas in the 30s of the last century, and also occupied China, where 85 million of the Chinese people were killed, and the most famous attack on China is Nanking in 1937. The number of victims was 300,000 in 6 weeks, but World War II was the most famous station of the Japanese army, and a major change point, as historians considered the Japanese army more dangerous than Nazi Germany at that time, where the Japanese and German army allied in 1939, and the number of areas occupied by the Japanese army increased, including China, the Korean Peninsula, Myanmar, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. But the story did not end here. In 1941, the Japanese forces struck the fleet the American in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, so America entered the war with and struck Japan with 2 atomic bombs in 1945. He was among the victims of hundreds of thousands of Japanese. Then the Japanese Emperor Hirohito announced the surrender and allowed Japan to dismantle its army until it proves that Japan has abandoned aggression. Then the Constitution was announced. The 9th article of it was not to form an army for attack or aggression. After that, in the 50s of the last century, several agreements were signed where the United States protects Japan through military bases, and Japan's possession of defense forces to assist in the event of an attack on its territory. In an article for Forbes magazine that Japan cannot enter a war even if it wants because young people of the age of entry into the Japanese defense forces from the age of 18 to 26 do not exceed 11 million out of the total 127 million of the population of Japan, where the majority of the population is elderly and old age and do not want to the service was due to the historical reputation of the army. However, the Japanese Defense Army became the 5th in the world, and because of the prohibition of the use of offensive weapons, the country compensated it with advanced defensive weapons and spending billions of dollars on the Navy and advanced submarines, and the last deal was in the amount of $23 billion to buy 105 F-35 aircraft. And this deal was due to China's greatly increased military power in East Asia and North Korea's nuclear missiles. The question is, will Japan abandon America and start relying on itself to develop advanced offensive weapons?